I was away for a school trip, just a week. When I returned, my bedroom was gone, turned into my sister's art studio. She needed the space, my mom said. Don't be selfish, added my dad. I didn't argue. I simply handed over my keys and walked out. 3 months later, my parents handed me a letter. They were suing me. Here's what I thought would happen. I'd drag my exhausted, travel-weary self through the front door, toss my bag into the hallway, throw out some snark like, home sweet overpriced suburban house, then collapse onto my bed like some melodramatic cartoon character. I might even whimper, just for effect. Instead, well, it wasn't that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind. I was just returning from a school trip. This wasn't one of those cushy, school-sponsored excursions. I paid for it myself. Every single penny saved up over months, birthday money, tutoring gigs, dog-sitting, selling handmade earrings online. Don't judge, they were cute, okay? I worked hard for that trip, like I was preparing for the Olympics, and I was proud of that. It was meant to be fun, and mostly it was. But travel doesn't treat me well. I get motion sickness on buses, planes, boats. If it moves and carries people, I'll get dizzy and regret ever being born. After 10.5 hours of bouncing around in a bus with terrible air conditioning, my body felt like it had been compacted into a Jenga tower. My head was pounding, my feet swollen, and all I could think about was that glorious moment when I could shower and crawl into my bed. My old, creaky, but reliably mine bed. And maybe surprise my family with a few souvenirs. Yeah, I know. Kind of embarrassing now. But I didn't go overboard or anything. A hand-carved bookmark for my mom, because she always talks about reading more when things settle down. They never do. A goofy keychain for my dad, with a joke I knew he'd roll his eyes at. And for my sister, well, she's really into art. She'd asked weeks ago if I could grab her some cool local art supplies, and I did. It wasn't easy either. I had to skip part of a group activity, haggle with a grumpy street vendor, and carry the thing in my bag for days, but I found this beautiful set of handmade charcoal pencils, each wrapped in printed local paper. I imagined her face lighting up when she saw it. Maybe she'd hug me. Maybe she'd say thank you without the passive-aggressive tone. I clung to this tiny, ridiculous hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd notice I tried. Yeah, that didn't last long. I finally get home, half-conscious, dragging my duffel bag behind me like a crime scene victim. The house is quiet. I step inside. My shoes hit the floor. Something smells different, like paint, acrylic. I hear a faint hum of music from upstairs. My suitcase thuds down the first step. That's when my mom pokes her head out of the kitchen. Oh, you're back, she says, as if I just went out for milk. No hug. No, how was the trip? Just that. I nod and try to smile. Yeah, the trip was good. Kind of exhausted. Just want a shower and some sleep. She pauses. Oh, about that. Your room, well, your sister's using it now for her art. I blink. Literally blinked, thinking maybe I misheard. Come again. She needs the space. She shrugs like we're discussing cereal brands. I slowly climb the stairs, my heart pounding, but not from tiredness. And then I see it. The door to my room, well, what was my room, is wide open, and everything is different. My posters are gone. My bed is gone. My bookshelves are gone. The walls are white now, splattered with colors and covered in pinned-up sketches. There's a new easel, a ring light, stacks of canvases, and one of those ergonomic chairs she's always whined about needing. Hey, careful where you step, my sister calls out, not even looking up. The floor's still drying. I just stood there. I didn't even ask if she was joking, because she wasn't, obviously. I backed away and went downstairs dazed. My dad was on the couch, watching some wildlife documentary like it was any other Tuesday. Hey kiddo, he said. Don't be selfish, okay? She's trying to build a portfolio. You're almost 18 anyway, right? Because nearly 18-year-olds don't need beds or basic respect. What about my stuff? I asked. It was the only thing I could think to say. My voice came out thin. It's all boxed up in the garage. You can take it whenever. I didn't say anything. Not really. I just nodded. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the house keys I'd had since I was 13, and placed them on the kitchen counter. I didn't make a scene. I didn't scream or slam doors. I just left. There was a second, maybe two of silence, and then I heard my mom behind me. Where are you going? You're not even 18 yet. Don't be dramatic, my dad added, barely turning his head. It wasn't drama. It was clarity. It's funny. You'd think when your world shifts like that, it would be loud, explosive. But it felt quiet, like the absence of something that was never really there to begin with. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe I'd call B. She always said I could crash on her couch if things got weird at home. Maybe I'd find a public bench and pretend I was starring in an indie film. I didn't know. All I knew was that I wasn't going back. People always say things like, "You must have seen it coming." Or "Didn't you notice the signs?" As if hindsight magically rewrites history. But the truth is, when you grow up in a family that ignores you just the right way, softly, politely, strategically, you become an expert at rewriting scripts. You learn to gaslight yourself before anyone else even gets the chance. It wasn't just about the room. That was just the breaking point, the trigger that ignited the flame. But the fire itself had started long before, years ago. My sister and I are only 2 years apart. She's older by age, but in almost every other way she's younger. Not because she's immature, but because she was always nurtured, wrapped in praise, treated like she needed special care. Meanwhile, I was labeled the independent one when I was only 5. At first, it seemed like a compliment. "You're so mature," they'd say, "so easy to deal with." But over time, that label turned into something else, like being forgotten at school pickup, making my own dentist appointments, or learning how to cook because mom was always busy helping my sister prepare her art submissions, and dad was constantly on a call. I think the first time I truly felt the difference was when I was maybe 8. We both entered a school art competition. Mine was a chaotic, messy collage made of old comic strips and candy wrappers. It was messy but kind of cool. I didn't win anything, but my teacher said it was imaginative. I was excited to show it off. My sister painted a tree. Just a tree with watercolor leaves and a little bird. It was nice. She won second place. My parents brought balloons, took her out to dinner, and told everyone at church. When I showed them my collage, my mom frowned. "There's a lot going on here," she said. "But hey, you tried." Still, I pinned it on my bedroom wall. That was just the beginning of many moments like that. When my sister wanted to take art classes, she got them, expensive ones. When I asked to join a writing workshop, they said, "It's too far, sweetie. We can't manage it with our schedules." When she broke the toaster, it was an accident. When I broke a dish, it was carelessness. When she forgot her lunch, Dad dropped everything to bring it to her school. When I forgot mine, the response was, "You're old enough to pack your own." And birthdays? Don't even get me started. Hers were Pinterest-worthy. Custom cakes, themed parties, friends from every corner of her life. Mine usually consisted of a last-minute grocery store cake and a text from my aunt saying, "Oops, I thought it was next week." So, I clung to the small moments, the crumbs. My dad would say I did well in school, but with a distracted smart girl, before going back to his emails. My mom bought me a book once because she thought I'd like something quiet. They weren't monsters, just inattentive, selectively loving. The kind of people who say "I love you" with their words, but never show it in their choices. As I got older, I stopped asking for things. I stopped showing them my accomplishments. It didn't matter. They always belonged to someone else. By the time I was 16, I had become the family's background character. I paid for my own phone plan. I applied to jobs, took shifts after school, managed my own schedule, finances, and everything else. I cleaned, ate, and lived quietly, and they praised me for it. She never gives us trouble. So low maintenance. What they really meant was, she doesn't need us, so we don't need to try. My sister, on the other hand, could cry over a broken pen and get a replacement set in 2 days. I once had a fever and passed out in the bathroom. I woke up an hour later to an empty house. My mom had gone grocery shopping, my dad was at work, and my sister was at her art club. No one noticed I was missing. I didn't tell them, because by then, I knew there was no point in making noise when no one's listening. That's why the room thing hurt the way it did. It wasn't just about the space. It wasn't even the bed. It was the final confirmation of what I had already known deep down. that I was disposable. They didn't even text me while I was gone. Not once. My mom later said they didn't want to bother me. My dad joked that they figured I needed a break from them. It's funny how they always wrapped neglect in nice, pretty bows. We were giving you space. Sure, so much space that you completely erased me. I tried to keep it together when I left. I really did. But when I finally stopped walking near B's place, I sat down on a curb and just broke. Not in a dramatic, movie-like cry, but in a slow, quiet leak of grief I hadn't known I was holding in. I didn't know where I was going, what I was doing next. My exams were coming up. I had nowhere stable to sleep. My sister had an art studio, and I had a duffel bag and a keychain souvenir she'd never get to open. One person came to mind. My grandmother. I hadn't seen her in a while. Not because I didn't want to, but because life had gotten too noisy. Visiting her was like stepping out of that noise for a while. She lived in a small elderly home across town. Nothing fancy. My parents just called it good enough. I made a mental note to visit soon. Not because I thought anything would change, but because sometimes, when everything else seems to be falling apart, you just need to be around someone who remembers who you were before you got worn out. When you're crashing on someone else's couch, everything feels temporary. Even you. B's family had been kind enough to let me stay with them for a few days, but I could sense it. Her mom's tight smiles, the awkward silences whenever I entered the kitchen, the subtle remarks like, "Are you sure your parents are okay with this?" As if they actually cared. I didn't expect luxury, but I just wanted to exist without feeling like I was imposing, to get through school without spiraling. Finals were approaching fast. I was running low on clean clothes. Every time someone offered help, borrowed shampoo, leftovers, I felt smaller, like I was fading, a ghost in someone else's life. I was still technically a high school student, but I didn't feel like one. I felt like I was in limbo, too old to ask for help, too young to vanish without it being a problem. And then there was the silence. Not a single message from my parents. Not one call, not even a "Hey, are you okay?" It should have stung more, but honestly, it didn't surprise me. What threw me off was how quietly the hurt crept in. It was like I was finally paying attention to something I'd been ignoring for years. I started avoiding anyone who asked questions. I told the school I was staying with extended family, which wasn't exactly a lie. B's mom was extending her patience more than I expected. I knew I couldn't stay there for long. I had 10 days until my birthday. 10 days until I turned 18 and became legally an adult. 10 days to figure out what adulthood even looked like when you don't have a place to call home. So, I went to see the one person who had always really seen me, even when no one else bothered. My grandmother. She lived in an elderly home that smelled like boiled potatoes and old newspapers, but she liked it, or at least pretended to. Her room was small, with lace curtains and an old crochet blanket that she swore was older than me. I hadn't planned on telling her much. I thought we might just sit, drink weak tea, and chat about nothing in particular. But the moment I walked in, she looked at me and said, "Something's happened." She always knew. I tried to joke it off, said I was just doing some soul searching. That didn't land. By the second cup of tea, I cracked. I told her everything. Not the version I gave B, but the real one, about the art studio, the couch, the packed up life, the silence from my parents, how I'd left them mementos, and they never even asked if I made it home safe. I expected sympathy, but what came next surprised me. Grandma sat there, still for a moment, then said, "Good." I blinked. "Good." She said it again. "You're out." "Good. They don't get to pull you back now." I didn't know how to respond, so she did it for me. She opened the drawer of her nightstand, pulled out a thick sealed envelope, rubber-banded and slightly wrinkled. "It's not money," she said before I could ask. "Not yet, but it's how you'll get where you need to go." I stared. "What is it?" "Bank info, legal papers, a letter to my lawyer. I've been preparing it for a while now." I hesitated. "Grandma, I don't want you giving up anything for me." She cut me off with a wave of her hand. "I'm not giving up. I'm giving to." Big difference. I didn't take the envelope, but the weight of it in her hand said everything. It wasn't just help. It was a future she'd quietly carved out, piece by piece, while everyone else forgot she even existed. That night, I finally opened the envelope. No cash, just neatly folded papers, a list of savings accounts, a note from her lawyer, and on top, in her handwriting, a short line. I can't give you a home, but I can give you a way out. The next few days moved quickly, faster than I could process. Grandma's lawyer confirmed everything was legal. She couldn't gift me the full amount until I was 18, but she could help with what she called preparation funds. I found a tiny studio, but it was mine. I signed a short-term lease, paid up front, and spent the first 2 nights sleeping on the floor because I didn't have a mattress yet, but it felt better than any bed I'd ever had. I still visited Grandma every day after school. We filled out paperwork, ate takeout, watched bad game shows, and laughed at the contestants' answers. She told me stories I had never heard before, about her first love, about how she used to sing in the church choir, and how she once slapped a man who insulted her cooking. It was peaceful, too peaceful in hindsight. There were signs though. A shadow on the horizon. A tightness in my chest whenever I checked my phone. A tension I couldn't place. At the time, I thought I was just adjusting, settling, figuring out who I was without a house full of people who acted like I didn't exist. I didn't realize that storm clouds were gathering, that things were about to shift again. And not in the way I'd hoped. Because when people ignore you long enough, they think you stop maturing until you become inconvenient. And apparently, I was about to become very inconvenient. They didn't call, didn't text, didn't ask. They knocked. It was a Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from work and slipped off my shoes when I heard it. 3 sharp knocks at the door. Not the friendly kind. Not the "I brought muffins" kind. The kind that immediately felt like an accusation. When I opened the door, there they were. My mom looked like she was in a rush to get somewhere else. Her makeup was perfect, and she wore that fake smile she put on when she was trying to be reasonable. My dad stood stiffly, arms crossed, like he was dealing with a problem child at a parent-teacher conference. "We need to talk," she said. No greeting, no "how have you been?" I didn't invite them in. I just stood there in the doorway, waiting. "We know what you've done," my dad said. It was impressive how quickly they got to the point. No niceties, no effort to warm up, just straight to the accusations. "She's not well," my mom added, her voice shaking. But it wasn't from sadness. It was from something more calculated. "She's been confused lately. She's not capable of making these decisions." I stared at her. "You're talking about Grandma? You took advantage of her," my dad accused. "You manipulated her into letting you access her finances." I laughed, a short, stunned laugh that almost felt like a cough. "I didn't take anything," I replied. "She gave it to me. She planned it months ago." "You expect us to believe that?" my mom snapped. "No," I said. "I don't care what you believe." I started to close the door. That's when my dad pulled out a folded sheet of paper with a legal header. "We'll see you in court." They had filed a report. Elder financial abuse. That was the term they used. They claimed Grandma wasn't mentally sound, that I had coerced her, isolated her from her real family, and tricked her into signing over control of her accounts. And just like that, everything I'd been building began to shake. Not fall. Not break. Just tremble. Like a house shaking when a train passes too close. The lawyer Grandma had used called me right away. He was furious. He said the accusation was a ridiculous smear job. But still, paperwork had to be filed, statements had to be made, and medical evaluations were required. It was real now. This wasn't just family drama. It was court dates, case numbers, and signatures. Grandma, for her part, was livid. She stormed into her doctor's office the very same day and demanded a full psychological evaluation. She passed every test with dry sarcasm and a memory sharper than mine. She gave the elderly home director a copy of the court papers and asked him, very calmly, to testify on her behalf. He agreed without hesitation. She even sent me a message that night. "Let them come. I've been underestimated longer than you've been alive." I was scared because I knew how skilled they were at turning things around. How easily they could slip into the role of concerned parents. They'd done it before, at school, at church, with relatives. They had a tone, a look, a script, and they were used to people believing it. I was just the girl who walked away, the moody one, the difficult child, the one who didn't answer calls or show up for family dinners. They'd paint me as ungrateful, manipulative, and money-hungry. But I didn't want money. I just wanted a place, a life where I wasn't punished for existing. The court process didn't take long. Their case was weak, rushed, and filled with contradictions. Grandma's evaluation shut it down completely. Her doctor testified that she was mentally competent and exceptionally aware. The elderly home staff backed her up. Their lawyer dropped them a week before the scheduled hearing, saying they were uncooperative. They tried to backpedal, making it sound like a misunderstanding, claiming they'd overreacted out of concern, that they just wanted what was best for Mom. But it was too late. Word got out. Extended family began asking questions. One aunt contacted me, furious. Apparently, my parents had told everyone that Grandma could barely remember her own name, that she was withering away. No one had bothered to check. Now they were checking, and it wasn't looking good. Grandma updated her legal documents again. This time she made me her official medical proxy. If her health ever declined, I'd be the one making decisions, not her daughter, not her son-in-law. I asked her if she was sure. She said yes without hesitation. They don't get to decide how I leave this world, she said. They already decided how little I mattered in it. A month passed. I focused on school, work, sleep, and remembering how to breathe. I was accepted into a university program across the state, with a full scholarship. It was a dream I never thought I'd be able to chase. When I told Grandma, I expected her to hesitate, to ask me to stay, to say she needed me close. She didn't. She just smiled and said, "Time to move. I promised to visit every weekend." She rolled her eyes. "You'd better." We found her a new care home closer to my campus. Safer, warmer. It had a garden, a therapy dog, and live music on Wednesdays. I paid the difference without a second thought. It felt like building something real, something that was mine. Years passed. I graduated, got a job I loved, rented a better apartment, paid taxes, and made grown-up phone calls. Every Sunday, I visited Grandma. Her money eventually ran out, but mine didn't. I took over the costs without hesitation. It wasn't a burden. It was an honor. She lived longer than anyone expected. She laughed louder than anyone her age had a right to. She told inappropriate jokes to the nurses and gave me pep talks before interviews. She lived. When she finally passed, it was quiet and peaceful, in her sleep. I held her hand until the very end. She left a note, just one line. "You gave me a second life. I hope I gave you yours." I didn't invite my parents or my sister to the funeral. I heard they're still together, that my sister's art career didn't pan out, and now she manages a craft store downtown. They don't speak to most of the extended family anymore. Sometimes I wonder if they ever think about me, about Grandma, about what they tried to take. But then I remind myself it doesn't matter. They had their chance to know me, to know her. They chose control over connection, image over truth. We chose each other. That's my story. Looking back, I don't know what shocks me more, how far they went, or how long it took me to stop expecting them to care. But in the end, I found something better than their approval. I found peace. And I found someone who believed in me when no one else did. Now, I want to know, do you think they ever would have treated me differently? Did I make the right choice by walking away? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, personal, emotional, and a little messy, hit subscribe.